Is it on? Now it's on. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gail Hodge, and with my colleague Steve Browdy, we're going to give you a deep dive into the global network of networks concept. So first off, what is GNON? The global network of networks is an architecture that facilitates interoperability across nations, agencies, institutions, and other data sharing initiatives, and it operates at both the data and the institutional level. GNON is realized through the use of GNON components, tools, and open standards. The GNON benefits depend, whoops, I advanced one too many. The GNON mission is not just to provide a technological solution. It's a technological innovation to support the work on all aspects of sustainability: energy, economics, food, water, and other sustainability goals, and at all levels of concern: global, regional, national, and local. For some reason, this is going ahead too far. The GNON benefits depend on what role is being played. So research scientists can more easily share data and information across disciplines and across communities. Decision makers and policymakers can more easily share information and knowledge to support social solutions. And in both roles, semantics is a major factor, a factor that GNON is designed to incorporate. So one of the major challenges, we think, in sharing data is the challenge of trying to reuse someone else's data and understand it. For example, the table columns in a database or objects in a model. How is this moving? Oh, come on. Oh, great. Okay, this is going to be fun. The table columns in a database or the objects in a model represent concepts, but those concepts can use different terms, or the same term can be used in different databases to represent different concepts, and this is the challenge of meaning. In addition, semantic resource can store important properties for an object that differ in context. So here's an example. Both physical oceanography and meteorology use the term sea surface temperature, and the definitions are very similar. But the important aspect in some instances and for some purposes would be that the depth of the measurement differs significantly, impacting any automated processing. So GNON exposes and shares meaning through semantic resources, through a consistent approach, and based on minimal standards and best practices can be expanded upon by any given community as needed. In addition to mechanisms for discovery and accessing the semantic resources, GNON provides for mechanisms for maintaining resources and for enhancing them. For example, incorporating the mappings between data sets that have already been created, the mappings between the meaning in one data set and the meaning in another. These are currently often lost after an integration project has been completed. Finally, an important aspect of GNON is the idea of community. It's a network of networks, it's a community of communities, and therefore engagement is very important. So we want both the networks and communities to contribute semantic resources that go along with their data, and also to be users of the GNON initiative. And I'll turn it over now to Steve.
Sorry, I forgot the animations off. So we are not trying to go into great technical detail in this talk. We're trying to hit all of the major aspects of GNON. We have a session coming up at 11, which will have plenty of time for discussions. The architecture of GNON supports what the value proposition is, and the value proposition gives the benefits. Some of these are interoperability, vast interoperability, scalability, which is very expansive, and flexibility, which means that people contributing to GNON in terms of providing resources, components, it can grow, they can contribute whenever they want, and allow the benefits of GNON to grow as well. The interoperability aspect of GNON is based on the architecture of the web. So we're not imposing any kind of top-down governance. There aren't any huge set of technical requirements that providers or participants in GNON need to follow. So, and this is all being done based on standards, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The assets of GNON fall into two main categories. There are assets that GNON either works on directly or cultivates or facilitates the working on of them, and that includes the resources: data resources, semantic resources, information resources, knowledge resources. The components or the aspects of GNON, the assets that GNON operates through, include the components and tools that the community provides. And all of this is done, as I said, through an expansive, scalable situation based on standards. So a big aspect of what we're talking about is that we're envisioning that data and other resources are being made available from communities, nations, research groups, whoever, and in particular networks, providing the data or their other resources in cubes with multiple dimensions, and those cubes can be, I guess the phrase we use is sliced and diced, but you can go in there and you can extract the different types of pieces that you want. The problem is that those cubes of data and the slices that you take may not match in terms of the meanings of their dimensions. It may not match in terms of the interpretation of what's in those dimensions, and so that is where semantics and brokering take place. The brokering allows for the ease and interoperability with regards to sharing this stuff. The semantics, through the mappings, the relationships, allow the things being interoperated to have meaning. And that brings extreme value and benefit to the participants of the network of networks. Of course, this is all based on a highly decentralized model, massively distributed globally, and it's all based on standards. And I will, as I said, we'll talk a little bit more about standards in a second. It's also based on federation, the federation model. The components that make up GNON can be GNON components, meaning that they are reused or customized versions of reference implementations that have been produced. I'll talk more about that in a second. They can be community components, in other words, processing or data access components that are part of a community or a nation or another network that becomes part of GNON. Okay. And then the little purple or whatever color that is, little rectangles, those are the actual resources that the components discover and access and make available to the participants of GNON. And those, the green and red circles are just defining whether that oval is a component provided by the community or provided by a reusable GNON implementation. This diagram does not impose or say that these black lines that connect it to are what have to happen. These are just examples. GNON can grow and expand essentially at will, depending on who's participating. And so these connections can exist in perpetuity, they can change. It's all up to the participants of the network of networks. But the main idea here is that the interconnections and the linkages between the components and the resources follow a federation model. So there's no centralized architecture here. There's no central hub, central infrastructure, cyber infrastructure, there's none of that. The mechanism for federating is very lightweight and built on, as much as possible, standards that exist and standards that are yet to be modified or developed. The reference implementations I referred to a second ago on the right will consist of certain types of registries, in particular a semantic registry, which is key and critical to what we're doing, and a semantic management interface, which is a way of providing a uniform look and feel for members of the network of networks to manage, work on, and make available their semantic resources. So these will be things that are open source, can be downloaded, can be reused as is for maybe groups of people that have capacity issues, or they can be taken by other people who have lots of resources, meaning time and money and people, and can be customized. And then and we also have other tools that are proposed that will help participants of GNON realize the benefits and values. There are lots of tools involved. They don't all have to be, it's not like we're selling a product. So these tools they can be provided by the community, they can be provided by those who work on GNON. It doesn't matter, as long as the functionality is there and provides the benefits. As far as standards go, so GNON works based on the utilization and exploitation of standards as much as possible. We can think of it as like data on the web. And there are a number of things that we can do. So we can use known standards as is. After analysis, if we determine that there are gaps, which is the top row, the little white things are gaps in the standard, we can suggest and try to get standards development organizations to address those standards. We can address them ourselves and suggest to the SDOs what changes we would like to see, and they'll get discussed. But we are not doing this like a roll your own thing. We are working with the standards bodies. There can be modified standards, as I just said, and if necessary, we can work on, propose, and work on new standards. But it's the standards that really supply the backbone or the fundamental basis for how GNON works. The way forward for us in the short term is to engage communities, provide information to and get information from standards organizations, standards development organizations, provide coordination and tools to get examples into a test bed and have the community start to play with these things. And we'll learn from that, they'll learn from that, and it will grow. And, it will grow. And I think we plan, obviously, it's not just one test bed and we're done. This will be an iterative thing. And at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be in a position where the participants from other networks and communities can start to really take advantage of this. And then it should grow organically. It's not a governance situation where there's some top-down responsibility or mandate for how things work. Hopefully that GNON will be so compelling in the value and the benefits that it delivers that the participants or potential participants will want to jump in, and as they do that, this will just grow organically over time. We have a breakout session which will go into more detail because we have much more time to openly discuss back and forth some of these issues and more. And that takes place today from 11 to 12:30 in room A1A, which I believe is just one room that way. And then tomorrow there's a session, again from 11 to 12:30 in room A2, about regional innovation, and I would encourage you to go to all of those. Also, we have a booth right around the corner, and these presentations and other presentations are playing sort of nonstop, and there's people at the booth that can answer questions and talk to you if you want to engage at all. And Gail and I thank you. And what I'd like to do in the remaining 5 minutes or so is just answer any questions or have any discussions if you'd like to do that. So does anybody have a question? Yeah.
So my question is, I have a data set which is reasonably well structured, let's say, and it's exposed through a service endpoint, and I want to join it into an existing network. What are my first steps?
Well, if you are using the standards that we're going to be using, or that is facilitated by a broker that understands those standards, then it shouldn't be a problem. We should just be able to, we have to know the endpoint, but once we have that linkage, we should be able to discover, access, and use the resource. Now, if you don't have that, then there would have to be some work done. Now, the work can be very lightweight in the sense that maybe in order to use the standards that we're talking about or to support the federation capabilities we're talking about, you'd have to reuse, say, a component that's available. And these should be available very easily as a plug-and-play solution. It's not like you have to rework everything you've done. And if you already have that capability, then you don't need to do anything. Bill?
So yesterday we heard about the UNEP ontology, the Sustainable Development Goal Interface ontology. Could you comment on how GNON and that ontology might interact?
Gail, you?
I think that the best way to describe it is that ontology would be a semantic resource, one of many. If it's an ontology in the true sense, then it's probably expressed in the OWL standard. We have not come to a conclusion yet as to the specific standard or standards for expressing the content that's behind a resource. So the actual content of that ontology. Could be OWL, maybe it needs to be RDF. But it can be registered as a semantic resource and made available. Hopefully, the content will grow and the use of it will grow so that as a semantic resource can be connected to other semantic resources at the semantics level so that you can use it to kind of mediate between the UNEP ontology and some other ontology.
It's also important, I think, to understand that as a rule in GNON, we're not necessarily going out there and grabbing content and bringing it in. So we're linking to content, and UNEP Live actually is a perfect example of a component that we could link to, and it will become part of GNON, and then we would have access to its resources, and it would have access to resources that are made available through GNON.
Rob, I think Rob wants to add something.
I'd just like to respond to that, and also partly to Jeremy's question, which is from a slightly more pragmatic viewpoint, which is the big challenge we have at the moment is that everybody has this terminology and it's all hidden. You can't easily access it, you can't discover it, and it's not exposed. So standardizing the way we express it with OWL and SPOS and so forth, we can identify the available standards and give you recommendations on how to standardize the way you publish it. And the other thing we need to do is standardize the way it can be discovered. And that's where we start putting like the linked data layer on top of it so that those terms can easily be discovered. And so coming back to Jeremy's question, one of the things you need to do is you need to make sure the terminology you use is available on the web so that someone can understand what your content is. So you do have a job, which is to publish the semantic assets. And this is the core. Once people start doing that, then the existing tools and technologies that exist but are not used effectively can now be leveraged. So GNON is about publishing that semantic content so we can start reusing the assets which exist. So at the moment, they're islands of information. GNON says, what do we have to do to make it into a network? And you've got to understand the terminology. So it's all about GNON providing guidance and, if necessary, tools to help you publish those semantics in a standardized way so there's a hope that these things can start joining together. So it's not an imposition of the massive system. It's really identifying a slightly different architectural responsibility. Tell me what you're talking about. And here's a standard way of doing it.
It's also important to point out that, because I know that there are individuals here and not here that work on, including myself, work on other initiatives. GNON is not designed, is not anticipated, wasn't conceived, and is not going to be a competitor to any of these other initiatives. It is cultivating and facilitating cooperation and collaboration. So if other initiatives overlap or have things in common, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. This whole space of global data sharing is like a big Venn diagram. So there are going to be intersections, but that's okay. There's not going to be one solution that does everything for everybody. So GNON is really in a position of trying to grow and interlink networks to provide collaborative and expansive capabilities. One of those, I don't know who raised their hand first.
How would different networks within GNON advertise or present to the system what capabilities they have? What types of capabilities have you identified? And how would these systems know which capabilities would make sense to present to the system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are working on
Three
that.
questions.
We are working on that. So that is part of the federation model and part of the small, lightweight, I'll call it programming interface, but it could just be standards. We'll be able to handle that. So people joining, or components and resources joining GNON will be able to make known what they have available. And then those will be able to be linked to and utilized.
Do you have an idea of
Yes.
how?
Yes.
So,
we
for
do.
example, you have visualization service of a three-dimensional
So I didn't hear you.
For example, you have a visualization service of a three-dimensional grids exposed by one of the networks. How would it expose this capability to the system where it will be registered?
Well,
why would it know that it makes sense to expose such capability?
Well, that's also, I mean, it's part, like I said, it's part of the federation model, but it also involves semantics. Because it's not, everyone doesn't say the same thing the same way. So there's a lot involved here. Go ahead, Rob.
Our current model is that you have to register your resource somewhere, and then you describe it in a way that that catalog understands. With GNON, it's much more like the web, which is that when you describe it, any community can basically harvest your description and decide how to link it to the network that they care about. So there's not one super catalog. Basically, each community, your responsibility is to describe your stuff better. We'll give you some tools to do that, and then each community can work out how to take that. So it's not so much your job. Yes, you can register with one or more communities who build those networks, but other communities can harvest and build the networks that they want out of this stuff. If you've described your stuff better, this is now possible. Currently, the barrier is that the description is only understandable by the one catalog that you're describing stuff in, and only one portal can understand your resource.
Right.
GNON basically tries to move beyond that so your resource is better described in terms of what content actually is involved. I'd think of them as networks, not catalogs. As many functional networks where the relationships are, catalogs are just big lists. And these are networks where you can find something relevant to something else easily, and each community can decide what's relevant and decide how to join the dots. Your job is to describe your stuff so that the communities have a chance to do that. Currently, they don't.
Right. Maybe one more question. We're running out of time.
My name's Davina Jackson. I'm from Sydney. I'm reporting on this general scene. And I'm producing books and blogs about different aspects of it. What I wanted to ask was what is it about GEOS that is not being done that GNON will be doing?
Well, to put it simply, first of all, GEOS is a system of systems, whatever that means.
And you're a network of networks.
Network of
What
networks,
does that mean?
but there's a difference, okay? In GEOS, there is a core architecture. GNON does not have a core architecture. Okay. In GEOS, there are certain components that are single instances of functionality that people have to use. In GNON, that won't be true. In GEOS, services, resources need to be registered. Okay, in GNON, they won't be. So those are a few of the main differences.
You want to be a looser system?
Well, I don't know if I'd use the word looser, but flexible.
More flexible.
More flexible and less dependent on a governance structure. So in GEOS, there's a governing body called GO,
Yeah.
and there are certain governance issues that that are followed. Excuse me?
That you think aren't working very well.
No, I didn't say that at all. This is not a competitive thing. I work in GEOS,
Yeah.
so GEOS is fine. GEOS provides valuable solutions, and that's fine. We're not trying to take that over. We're not trying to undo that. We actually would like to participate with GEOS. GEOS would be a network to us of systems, and we would be able to harvest and cultivate and make available things from GEOS, just as well as GEOS could take available other things that are exposed through GNON that it may not know about right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing, just one question. You're answering a lot of these questions from the floor. Just for my journalism, what's your name and your role?
Sorry, my name's Rob Atkinson. I've been part of what's called the GNON Foundational Infrastructure Team, as in the technical people who've been trying to carry these ideas forward. A bit of context, the analysis of the requirements came out of an expert group convened in the first Iron Earth Summit, and a whole range of analysis was done by quite a broad group as a white paper. And we've been working through analysing the available standards and the directions to identify, given the Agidi mission and those recommendations, what to do. So this isn't just a few techies coming to the table and say, hey, we've got a great idea. This is a systematic, a long-term analysis of we're seeing where systems are working and where they're not. If I can get back to that GEOS issue, one thing GEOS won't do is scale down to the local level. And in the sustainability, we need to be able to move from the global to the local scale and back. And if we don't have something like the web where everybody can participate with a very low participation cost, GEOS is still a relatively heavyweight thing which works well at the national levels. It's not going to help us when we start pulling in all the detail we need right down at the local levels. It simply won't scale. We need to have the ability to build as many little GEOSes as we need, if you like, and join them together effectively. So that might be another way of looking at the problem. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So this, I guess, maybe the last comment, but the scalability issue, this is a very, very important issue, and this is a very differentiating issue between GEOS and GNON. Because in GNON, like I said, it can grow organically. If somebody wants to participate and they have the right standards and all that stuff, they can do it easily. They don't have to go through any major process. In GEOS, to become a participant in GEOS or a provider in GEOS, you have to go through a registration process that could take as little as a few minutes. It could take as long as a few weeks. So it's not as scalable. I think plenary is starting, so thank you very much. If you have any questions, come to our talk and go to our booth.